Hi everyone. This lecture will go over the key elements of information literacy, what it is, why we need it, and how we can obtain it. To talk about what information literacy is, we first have to understand what information is. You've now watched the What is Information video, which is very interesting, but the main takeaway from that video is that information is always contextual. No matter how information is presented, whether it be a book, a journal article, a tweet, a weather report, or whatever, it's always the contents and the context of those contents that is the main influencer behind the truth of the information being presented. I promise this will make more sense as the course proceeds. What is information exactly? The word is derived from the verb inform, so anything that is material that informs us. A news article, a magazine article, really anything that can be delivered to you in some form. But information is nothing without human interaction, as was illustrated by the mug metaphor in the What is Information video. So, because of the human element, information is then the substance which the informing material transmits to the person being informed. Information then comes in many different packages. News reports, journal articles, tweets. Especially at this moment in history, tweets are very prominent information pieces. Documentaries, Reddit posts, wives' tales, and other stories passed down through family structures. So really anything that can be transmitted from one person to another can serve as an information package. Every package of information has different ways of informing and reasons for informing. Sometimes it's to disinform or to misinform. And those are things that we will certainly learn to look out for throughout this course. So even with just the concept of information itself, you can tell it's getting a bit murky. And this is where information literacy comes in to help. Information literacy then is the ability to recognize and articulate an information need, to be able to seek out information to satisfy that need, be able to evaluate information and its sources critically in relation to your needs, incorporate selected information into one's own knowledge base, and to use information effectively to accomplish a specific goal. These are the Association of College and Research Libraries Competency Standards from 2000. The standards have been updated a bit to be more integrative to societal needs, but for the sake of this course, we will use these more task-based benchmarks, since these are what is used in the Carolina Core curriculum. These are the applied skill sets. We will go beyond these in a bit in this class and touch on media literacy and learn more about media messages and other more nebulous forms of information as we go through the class. So all these competencies and skill sets help with figuring out what to do with information and how to use information effectively. So why do we need these skills? Why is it something that requires a class? One of the main reasons is that we live in an age of information abundance. Information is literally everywhere. You can simply pull out your phone now and be inundated with information. So we need to know what to do with all that and learn the best practices for verifying the reliability of information that comes to us, because information, especially that which we are most consistently engaged with, is what influences our decisions. Being able to recognize reliable information and being able to engage with it responsibly is one of the key outcomes of this course. Evolving information needs in the workplace is another key reason for obtaining information literacy skills. Employers really expect you to be able to identify when you need to seek out resources to make an informed decision, and they expect you to be able to use credible information to make those decisions. The same thing is happening in academia, where due to the massive abundance of information, there is an expectation for students to be able to use information more successfully. A lot has resulted from entering the age of information abundance. One is that the information landscape has become much more confounding. It used to be that the main sources of information were daily newspapers, television and radio programs, all of which would be consumed by most information consumers, and that consumption was much more of a shared experience. Even for most of your parents, and certainly your grandparents, they would remember only having a handful of choices as to where to get their news, and most people would have gotten their news from those limited choices. Now, however, with the creation of the internet and the subsequent democratization of information production, you can get your information from a seemingly endless supply of choices. As the choices of content providers expands, so too does the potential for unreliable information to be disseminated. calling in the importance for critical evaluation skills, which is a key component to this class. Another result of abundance is that information has become corporatized. There is a lot of money to be made in the dissemination of information. Not to say that this is a bad thing, but knowing the influences and motivations behind the formation of a piece of information can really help in judging its credibility and reliability. Information is also politicized. Even the most mundane of facts can be twisted and skewed to fit political purposes. If you've been paying attention to the information landscape over the last 2 years, especially in relation to national elections in the US and Europe, then you've probably seen evidence of this. Another key outcome of information abundance has to do with the fact that people want to believe what they want to believe. This leads to motivated reasoning and confirmation bias. These are both concepts that describe what takes place for a lot of us when we have an information need. And that is that we have a tendency to be drawn to information that is affirming to our preconceptions, which makes it easier for us to resist information or ideas that contradict those preconceptions. We are also seeing a breakdown of shared experiences. We are no longer tied to television schedules, for example, where everyone watches the same programming at the same time. Thanks to the variety of devices available, we can now consume whatever we want, whenever we want. I think this has led to a drastic change in how we think about the information that is broadcast to us. The massive amount of options on how we consume media leads to the creation of very individualized realities, which can create what have been referred to as filter bubbles and echo chambers, concepts that were highlighted heavily in the aftermath of the last U.S. election cycle. Both of these concepts point to the fact that, due to the social media and information abundance in general, we are able to shape the flow of information to us in a way that we only see information that we want to see. Using Facebook, for example, you could choose to only follow CNN and not Fox News, and wind up missing perspectives that may help shape a more holistic view of a particular issue. This, of course, calls for the need to consult with a diverse set of sources when making key decisions or when shaping one's personal outlooks. Part of what's going on in the age of information abundance is that we are getting overwhelmed. Because of that, I believe we look for the options that are easiest on our brains, and that's why it's easy to fall into confirmation bias and echo chambers. We feel less bogged down by the choices when we choose to ignore anything that disagrees with what we already believe. Now, I don't mean to say that this is the case for everyone, but I do believe that it's very easy to get bogged down by information choices, much like how our gentleman here is getting bogged down by this bombardment of harsh realities. Researcher and educator Clay Shirky, who has written and researched extensively on how humans interact with information, actually argues that the breakdown in relation to responsible engagement with information doesn't have to do with the actual abundance of it, but rather in our inability to evaluate information properly. So he thinks information abundance is really good, and so do I, as long as we know how to deal with it. It's not information overload, he says, but rather filter failure is the main problem with information abundance. He argues that we are not developing the skill sets that allow us to really critically evaluate information. Again, this is where information literacy steps in to help, since critically evaluating information based on reliability, credibility, and specific needs is one of the key concepts of information literacy and one of the main learning outcomes for this course. So everyone knows this person by now. He is currently the President of the United States. This meme represents something that Donald Trump said during the 2016 election campaign. The statement was in relation to a man who rushed the stage at one of Trump's rallies and was stopped and detained by Secret Service. And certainly I'm not trying to sanitize the man's actions. He should not have charged the stage and even implied violence. But then Trump went on to talk about this person and shared a very obviously doctored video that implied that the man had ties to ISIS. Now, there was video evidence of this man protesting in various ways, including doing things like standing on the American flag. And despite whether or not you agree with such actions, he does have the right to do so. The video that candidate Trump shared rather unfairly paints this person as a member of ISIS. This contention was false. The man had absolutely no ties to ISIS, but you can see how dangerous this could be for the man in question. when Chuck Todd on Meet the Press later asked Trump about this in an interview and wondered if he thought he was putting the man's life in danger by spreading false information that the man had ISIS ties, Trump responded by saying, "What do I know about it? All I know is what's on the internet." As a librarian, that really resonated with me. Because yes, people take information from the internet all the time and think just that. Well, it's on the internet, so it must be true. However, in certain contexts, this notion becomes problematic. In academia, you wouldn't consult with sources that would simply be referred to as the internet, and I wouldn't consider it a good practice to influence any major decisions. You have to question the authority of the message's creator. It's certainly problematic when a potential world leader says something like this: "The internet is the Wild West of information. You can't just say, 'all I know is what's on the internet,' and expect to sound credible." So what I would prefer is that in the future, when Mr. Trump is sharing information, he will adopt an attitude that is more in line with this: "All I know is what I have painstakingly researched and evaluated to be verifiable, truthful information," or at least had members of his staff evaluate the information. A big part of what we will go over in this class is critically evaluating information that you are exposed to, as well as with information that you seek out. Everything is deserving of scrutiny, and this class will help develop a critical mindset for engaging with information. Okay, now for an example from the other end of the political spectrum. Let's take a look at this. I found this image shared along my Facebook feed the day right after the 2016 presidential election. This is something that my own confirmation bias really responded to. I was like, oh yeah, did he really say that? I bet he did. And there was a part of me that really wanted it to be true that Trump, a long time ago, told People magazine that if he were to run for president, he would run as a Republican because they have the dumbest voters who will believe anything on Fox News. When I first saw this, like I said, my confirmation bias got excited, but the librarian in me found it to be rather questionable. For starters, it just says People magazine, 1998. No month, no issue, no page number, or any other details that would help track down the original source, or this original article in this case. So what I did, like any other good researcher, I tried to go to the supposed source, People magazine. I actually looked in one of our databases that indexes People magazine and searched for any and all articles from 1998 and even the few surrounding years just to be sure that mentioned anything about Donald Trump. Fortunately, through our database Reader's Guide Full Text, we have access to the full text of People magazine articles going back this far, and while searching through these holdings, I couldn't find any evidence of Mr. Trump ever saying such a thing to People magazine. And furthermore, I later found out that the image of him here is actually a screen capture from a video clip and not a photo that may have been published in People magazine. And I came to the conclusion that this wasn't a real quote and is indeed fake, and then a few days later I found out that this was shared by a left-leaning website, The Other 98, and was disseminated specifically to undermine Trump's election win. I show you this because these types of things are created and shared from all areas of the political spectrum to not only engage with confirmation bias, but also to be mean in some cases, to detract from people's agendas. And as citizens, we need to know how to read through the BS and be able to tell what's real and what's not real. What's problematic with this is that I'm not very confident that much of the population has the skills and tools available to always check the facts. How many people actually have the ability to search through old People magazines to fact check that meme, for example? Probably a pretty small section of society, especially since their website does not archive articles that far back. There's a big roadblock to information evaluation in regards to access. For example, at any given time, there are about 20 million college students in the U.S. These students may have access to online databases. However, keep in mind that our particular university is a large flagship school that can afford access to a lot of online databases. There are many schools that can't afford the large breadth of access that we are fortunate to have available. So even within the college student and faculty populations, not everyone would necessarily have access to the EBSCO database that indexes People magazine to be able to fact check that quote. This is obviously a small-scale example, but information roadblocks are a key factor in how individuals engage with information. The skill sets and resources available to society are not equal for everyone, and this inequality can actually make it hard for an individual to obtain the agency to know what's real and what's not. Throughout this course, you will obtain the skills to help you make informed, well-researched decisions about information that you engage with. So what can we do to obtain strong information literacy skills? Learn as much about different information packages and their disseminators as possible. Learn to evaluate sources for consistency and reliability. Learn how to search for additional sources of information. So not just finding that one thing that says what you want to hear, but multiple sources that support your conclusions. I like to call it triangulating your sources. If you find one source that agrees with you, cool. But if you find 3 or more, then you might really be onto something. You will also want to work on committing information literacy competencies to daily practices. Critical habits of mind. I like to call it critical consciousness. This is when you have trained your mind to question the veracity of every piece of information you are exposed to, especially the pieces that have strong meaning to you. This consciousness will have you asking questions like, who created this piece of information? What purpose did they create it for? Was there a financial motivation behind creation or publication of the information? These are just a few of the questions that are essential to evaluating information sources. Critical habits plus information skills, so knowing how to use search tools, employ a reliable search strategy, and retrieve information effectively, equate to not just information literacy skills, but really strong information literacy skills, which is the big goal of this class. I hope this gives you an overview of information literacy in general. Please let me know if you have any questions or comments about this, and we will pick up from here with the next lecture. Thank you.